Come on in, y'all. Come on in. Yes, sir. James Cleveland. Tomorrow.
What's it gonna be like tomorrow?
Come on in, y'all.
Will we be able to sit together at the welcome table? Will we have peace of mind? Will the nation be good and kind? And will we ever learn how to live together? Man, woman, boys and girls, the black and white next door to each other. Learn how to treat every man like a brother. Will ever come? My God, I wonder will it ever come? Will it ever come? Tell me, will it ever come to God?
Think about it.
About
Tomorrow.
Thank you, Jesus. Let me tell you something. We don't ever get together down here.
Well,
Oh, it'll be sad. Oh, but thank God I'm not worried about it. No, 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 no.
cause one of these mornings it won't be long. You're gonna look for Leonard and he'll be gone. I'm going up to heaven, gonna sing and shout, and nobody there is gonna put me out. I'm look up David in the heat of the day, tell him to grab his harp and begin to play. And I know my role was gonna fit me well, cause I tried it on when I was on my way to hell. Lord have mercy. Oh, 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 man. Lord have mercy. Good evening, good evening, good evening. That's an old James Cleveland song, and the show, this Tell It Like It Is show this evening is kind of focusing on tomorrow, today. We are in trouble in a lot of different ways, y'all. A lot of different ways. I put in my subject box today 2 items: local elections and the Ukraine and Israeli wars. We've got a lot of things. I know some of you will say, well, Pastor Mark, why are you talking about Ukrainian wars and stuff, aren't you? In a fight with the city of Brunswick trying to help the homeless? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I sure am. And aren't you working hard trying to get several folks elected across the southeast, the state of Georgia? Yes, I am. The client, we got candidates in all kind of places: Sandersville, Sparta, Georgia, Houston County. We got people running different areas of the state, all the way down through Dublin and all the way across. Just through, that's what we do. And why would you be worried about what happens in Israel and in Ukraine? Well, one of the things that got me thinking a lot today was back in 1988. I told y'all I've been involved in some stuff for a long time. Most people don't know the width and breadth of what I do. They only know the part they see. And I wouldn't have it any other way. But back in 1988, I was fortunate enough, having pastored Litway for about 5 years, I asked the church if they would help to sponsor me to go on a trip to Israel. And I went on the trip to Israel. There were some things that had happened to me spiritually that caused me to want to and need to go to Israel. Ultimately, I was baptized in the Jordan River in Israel. And but I had more than one reason for going. Another reason was I was going as, to some degree, a guest of people connected with the Palestinian Liberation Organization. The Palestinians are the people that a group of folks from that group called Hamas. The other day, an outrage and grave violence. These people pushed down the barriers between the Gaza, between Gaza and Israel, southern part of Israel, and went in and killed a lot of people, took hostages, and there's some of those same people that I met with, people who were affiliated with them at that point, in 1988, including the chief spokesman for the PLO. Her name is Dr. Hanan Azraoui. I saw her on television this morning on MSNBC talking. I've not seen her physically since I met with them in the Damascus Hotel in Jerusalem in 1988, and learned a grave lesson talking to her. She's just a few years older than me. I think she's 77 now. Still active, but she's been kind of pushed aside. She's very reasonable, very logical, extremely smart person. She was the only female person in the Palestinian Liberation Organization's negotiation delegation, and because she was so smart, she led the delegation, and she and I talked a lot on this evening. One of the things I found out was why the Palestinians and the Israelis are consistently and seem irrevocably fighting. America, we only get part of the story. Suffice it to say that in 1948, a prophecy from God was completed. God told in His word that Israel would become a nation again in a day, in one day. And on May the 12th, 1948, Israel, for the first time in centuries, had a homeland where they are now, in Israel. But before that, it was called Palestine. Thus, the people are called Palestinians. Well, when America and England and other nations were grateful to the Jewish people, for basically underwriting the wars financially, World War II in particular, for England, they gave them that land, gave them somebody else's land for all intents and purposes. But and they settled there, and there was some there, but then they officially said, okay, this is your homeland. No matter who's sitting there right now, this is your homeland now, and help them to enforce that. Many people who I met with during that trip were people who had lived, particularly in the West Bank, who the Israelis and the Israel government had given them, as far as their ancestral homes were concerned, places where their families had lived for generations, and said, okay, we're taking this from you, and would give them 24 hours to pack up as much stuff as they can. And they've come with soldiers and bulldozers, have them stand across the street, bulldoze their houses down, and build settlements. Take it straight away from them. This, of course, created extreme hatred and hostilities. Those little children who saw that grew up to be grown men that were very dangerous. Now, before the Hamas stormed the barrier between southern Israel and Gaza, Israel controls the power and the water going to Gaza. That's why right now you hear them say they don't have power, they don't have water. Israel controls that. But before this atrocity, and it was wrong for the Palestinians to do this, to go in and shoot up and kill people, take hostages. But before they did that, imagine living in 2023 in a place where another power, another group of people, would ration power to you systematically. The power, the electrical power, would be on in Gaza for 4 hours, then off for 8, or on for 8 hours, then off for 4. This is how these people live, for no good reason, except to show who's in control. And so, as I come to you tonight, giving shout outs to Mother Barbara Wilson and Mother Lucille Collins, I want you to understand something. That who did this, or why it was done, who's to blame, all of that's going to fade in importance momentarily. All of that's going to go away quickly if we're drawn into a war. Because if we're drawn into a war, our sons and daughters and our national treasures are going to be drawn into a global conflagration. They call it a world war. We're going to be all drawn in to a fight that we don't want to fight, against people and causes that we don't want to be involved in. This is not hyperbole. This is not what you call this, someone just coming up with a story, trying to say something controversial. This is a fact. What most of you don't realize is already Iran has shot some missiles and drones at American troops in Iraq. That's already happened. That's happened already. Now, whether or not we're going to find out whether they hit any of us or killed any of us, we don't control the news, so we won't know. But I can tell you right now that they have indeed shot missiles and drones, armed drones, at American troops and at American ships. And it doesn't take much for us to end up over there fighting and dying. And so we need to do everything we can to fight for democracy and freedom with our treasure and with our power of the United States to keep Putin from overtaking Ukraine and do everything we can to settle these hostilities in Israel. Very important. Very important. Good evening, Thelma. How you doing, sweetheart? God bless you. And so I also want to take some time today to tell everybody to pray for everybody involved in that war and in that battle. And trust me, with the fact that our people don't even know how to keep the government going at this point, America's in trouble. America is in trouble. I don't know why we are allowing principally Donald Trump and his group of supporters to throw this nation off so bad. But it is obvious that's what we're doing. And if we don't get it back right, we're in trouble. And that's what I'm going to talk about internationally. But then there's this thing that's going on here locally. And this thing that's going on locally is a mess. Right now, in the city of Savannah, we have a mayoral race that's obviously for sale. We have a mayor's office that's obviously for sale. A little show and tell, if I would. Let's see if I got this for you. Okay. I wanted to show you all this. This is the amount of money in Van Johnson's last financial report, which was at the end of last month, and he's still raising money. So he's obviously over $600,000 at this point for a mayoral race. Now I want to read something to you. I want you to see if you could follow this. This is Van Johnson's statement he made to WJCL News 4 years ago. In 10 days, it'll be 4 years to the date. But this was about 4 or 5 days before the actual election. Listen to what he says. The disturbing numbers clearly tell me the story. Our business leaders and special interests have heavily invested in Mayor DeLoach. Eventually, those investments have to pay dividends to these investors. And Vance goes on to say, my campaign, by contrast, consists largely of donations under $100. Many of these donations being less than $50, which represent the benevolence of those who can't write big checks, but who believe that Savannah can be and do better. Fortunately, Savannah is not for sale, and as mayor, I will be unbought and totally dedicated to serving the needs of the entire community. These are the words of Van Johnson. Unbought, Brother Johnson, at $586,870 as of last month. Unbought. Wow. Let me show you something else. We have his figures still. But I want to show you this. 800, look at that. That $586,870 demand. Patrick Rossiter, first time running for anything. $166,185. Carol Bell, who lost last term to Keisha Gibson Carter, is running again. $123,965. And if we look on their campaign disclosures, you find that the same people gave money to all three of these. The principal donations the lists are the same. What's more, the principal donators list in the case of Brother Johnson matches the list of the donors that gave to DeLoach last time. The people he said, and I quote, eventually those investments have to pay dividends to the investors. So if that was the case with Mr. DeLoach, then these investments that they're making with you are going to have to pay dividends to the investors. Oh, but there's another point that needs to be made. When he said this about DeLoach and how much these big investments was that he had to make sure that these people end up getting a return on their investments, DeLoach's total amount raised was a little over $200,000 4 years ago. They gave DeLoach a little over $200,000. At this point, if he just got $14,000 more dollars, because the donation didn't stop here, then Van Johnson would have raised $600,000 for a job that pays $60,000 a year. Now, if he understood the concept that those who invested in DeLoach would want a return on their investment, then he's talking about almost 3 times the same people. Oh, have mercy. And then the other day, me and a friend of mine were talking about endorsements. I remember some years ago, Otis Johnson was telling us that he didn't endorse. I don't do endorsements. But since that time, Otis Johnson endorsed Wade Gaston against Joyce Griggs. He and the Jackson have endorsed Wade Herring, Mayor Jackson endorsed Wade Herring against Joyce Griggs. Eddie DeLoach endorsed Wade Herring. And then the other day, there was a flyer for Rossiter. And on that flyer, you had Mayor Johnson against Alicia Miller Blakely. Now, I don't mind people who've served endorsing they have a right to free speech. But how come the people who came to us for their votes in Representative Johnson's case, in the Jackson's case, who's in the state house as a state representative, who, by the way, y'all haven't heard a peep out of her bringing things to the community, but that's for another day. The point I'm making is, how come we only see their endorsement and pictures in the papers for white candidates until they're all listed on a flyer for a fundraiser for Rossiter, and Jackson's on there, and Johnson's on there, Otis Johnson's on there, and DeLoach is on there, and Van Johnson's on there. All of them endorsing Rossiter against Alicia. Did y'all hear me say DeLoach is on there? DeLoach is giving money to Van Johnson too. Oops, there it is. For the first time, and I'm not saying, because I voted for a lot of white folk in my life, Democrat and Republicans. I have. The sheriff's race is a partisan race. And the Democrat was a man I knew, like personally. I just didn't think he'd be the best sheriff. So I supported the Republican, John Wiltshire, and he won. So it's not about party affiliation, it's about, but when you only support black folk, the only time you can put your name in endorsement is white folk. Until, and I was glad to see this, until we got the Van Johnson. And so Edna and Otis and those are coming out for him. That's the first black that I've seen him come out with any force. That's what I saw. Yeah. Chuck Fagan says if Van got 3 times the money, they're going to want 3 times the return. That's going to be huge. That's going to be a tall. But you're right. But you're right. And when I saw the list of who all gave, that's the Republican Party. Now I know this is a nonpartisan race, but if it walk like a duck, quack, water won't stick to it. I think it's a duck. So anyway, I gotta go back to this thing. I gotta go back to this. These aren't my words, these are his. In 2019, I gotta go back to this. Van Johnson himself says These are his words on WJCL at on October 31st, 2019, about 4 or 5 days before the election. I think it was on November the 3rd was the election. The disturbing numbers clearly tell the story. Our business leaders and special interests have heavily invested in Mayor DeLoach. Eventually, those investments have to pay dividends to the investors. My campaign, by contrast, consists largely of donations under $100, many of these donations being less than $50, which represent the benevolence of those who can't write big checks, but who believe that Savannah can be and do better. Fortunately, Savannah is not for sale, and as mayor, I will be unbought and totally dedicated to serving the needs of the entire community. That's what he said. That's his words. Unbought. Unbought. For $586,870. Unbought. Nice price though. If it wasn't true, why did you say it? I'm just telling you what God loves. I'm telling you the truth. No. I grew up with and around family members, and I knew Linda Wilder Bryan since we were young. So I don't have any animus against her. Personally, I don't. I really don't. Never will. But this isn't about friendship. This is about building a responsible community where people care, particularly for those, government. One of the chief. It is to serve and protect people. That's one of the integral duties of government. But in that, you still have to prioritize. You can't give everybody everything. And so from the limited resources, and we have more than limited resources in Savannah right now, they've got a fund balance through the roof. The Savannah City government is swimming in money. That's why Keisha and Alicia and Bernetta were right to tell them to roll back the taxes, but they were greedy, and so they didn't. If Keisha and Alicia and Bernetta, Robert Bryant, Todd Rose, Rashida Edwards, and either Tyra, either Taylor Washington or Tia Brightwell and Mike McCann, if those folks and Robert Bryant, if those folks are elected, you can guarantee, I can almost guarantee that taxes will be lower. That they will lower the taxes, because these people have already said that this didn't make any sense. They already voted it. But not Linda, not Nick Palumbo, not Curtis Purdy, not Van Johnson. Raise the water. They raised the water bill rate. Savannah is robbing folk for water and sewer and refuge. I mean, it's a cold-blooded stick-up. They raised the rate, and here's the reason they say they raised the rate. Because the cost of living is going up. And so, it's not that we have a shortfall or anything, but everything's going up, so we're going to raise the rate 4%. That was the argument. And then they voted and raised it. Savannah's the only place I've ever heard of a person having a $2,000 water bill. And when I said that to somebody one day, they said 3 or 4. I've never heard. How can you ever use $2,000 worth of water? Your refuge bill shouldn't change. Your sewer bill might change a little bit, But your refuse bills, they're picking up your trash, shouldn't change. But when they tie them all together and make it one rate, everything goes through the roof. People are suffering. When rent is $2,000, when rent on a regular house, regular apartment, is $2,000, do the math. If a person makes $15 an hour, work 40 hours on a good job, their take-home pay, their gross is $600. $15 an hour, $600. That's what they get that for per week. When the taxes come out of it, Social Security, if you got a medical plan, when all that comes out of it, you're talking about that person bringing home $475, $500. What if they bring home 500 out of the 6, which will be high, and they get 4 checks for that month? They get $2,000. Well, how much did you say the rent was, Pastor? $2,000. Well, let's say they found a good deal, and the rent was $1,500 for a decent place. They got maybe 2 kids. They need a room or 2. They bring home $500 a week. That's $2,000. They got $500 to live off, eat off, pay for water, lights, gas, cable, phones, clothes, insurance, car. Desperation breeds crime. These are just facts. Yeah, John, those were sneaky behind the backhanded cost increases. And John McMaster asked me, did you know they doubled the convenience fee on all parking application purchases? I did not know that. They never told anyone, they just did it. Well, that never told anyone thing reminds me of something, John. I literally have been involved in city government in the city of Savannah on an up close and personal basis since 1980. Okay, that's 43 years. I came home from prison in 1978, got involved with Dr. Wesley James Ball and Judge Eugene Gaston, Deanie Frazier, Dorothy Pelote, and some others, Benny Pelote and others, and got really involved, got in the trenches. Came back home a preacher. And so I've been intimately involved in the process of building the Ralph Mott Gilbert Civil Rights Museum, the Civil Rights Monument on River Street. Intimately involved in fighting for the funding for May Street Y, different things. I could go on, but it's not about what I've done. This is about the principle. And so I've gone back and forth to city council meeting and county commission meetings all these years. Never did I envision that one day there would be a person elected in the city of Savannah at the school board, or at the county commission, or at the city of Savannah that would take over the city autocratically. That means he's running it himself, for himself, basically by himself. you all been worrying about why is there no decorum? There would be no decorum. There's no decorum in a church where where the pastor has no input from nobody else in terms of what's going on with that church. Churches who do that and the pastors who do that, they don't last. They literally don't last. Because these are things that's supposed to be done collectively by groups, by people having input and buy-in, particularly if it's an elected position with elected people around you, with a board of aldermen, a city council. And so up to and until Jay Melder came as city manager, because Patrick Monahan, who was interim city manager, and then Michael Brown, who was interim city manager, who had been a city manager before for the city of Savannah, as long as they were there, the city of Savannah had executive sessions where they talked about legal matters, personnel matters, and property purchases or sales. Those are three things that you have to talk to in closed, secret sessions. That's the things that are allowed by the state of Georgia. John McMasters is on here now. He was a county commissioner, and he could tell you that basically every time they had a county commission meeting, they would either go in executive session before, after, and sometime if a thing came up and they were arguing, during, they would shut the meeting down and go in executive session to work out the legal matter or the personnel matter or the property matter, come back in and reconvene. Governments have to have executive sessions. Jay Melder came to Savannah as the city manager at the end of September, the beginning of October 2021. As of that point, the mayor buffaloed him, brought him under his muscle. And the city of Savannah has not had one executive session for more than 2 years. They haven't sat down and talked about legal matters, and they should have talked about some legal matters, because they should have been sitting in the room talking about legal matters, if only because of this. This is the suit for the Weeping Time Coalition. We're suing the mayor and aldermen of the city of Savannah. They have never sat in a room and talked about this suit. Not once. John McMaster says autocracy knows no decorum. And John McMasters confirmed my statement that they had executive sessions every 2 weeks when he was on the county commission. And they still do it. That's not new. They do it at the school board. Every meeting they have their executive session with the lawyer and things of that. They do all over the Richmond Hill, Bryan County, Liberty County, Pembroke, Charleston. This is, it's unconscionable to believe that this man does this. So without executive sessions, how are the decisions being made? Van Johnson. Whether to pay off a suit or something like that, Van Johnson. He put it on the agenda. He's got his flunkies to vote with him. Nick Palumbo, Curtis Purdy, Dietrich Leggett, Linda Wilder Bryant. Automatic. And they don't question nothing he does. Vote with him every time. Now, I used to say that he's like Donald Trump, but I don't say that no more because he's worse than Trump. Trump still had to have an attorney general that would make him do a couple of things right. He still had a chief of staff. He still had a White House attorneys. You know, yeah, he still had some folks around him that will, you know, kind of try to bring him back. The man don't have that. The man has run this city like a tyrant. I was talking to a lady today. She's going through some changes. She said she called the mayor on it. She said he didn't say nothing about helping him. She said he started asking her, have you called this person? Have you called that person? Have you called this? She said, well, I'm calling you. I'm calling you. I need help. Again, John McMaster said, pitiful. Van's playing us all. Van's playing us. And then again he says, it's unbelievable. No topics on litigation, personnel, or land purchases have not occurred. That's right, it's impossible. It is impossible for a city the size of Savannah to have had no legal matters, no land purchases, and no personnel matters that they had to deal with as a council. That is, in 2 years, that is impossible. Yet, watch this. Every time a story goes into the newspaper, on WTOC in particular, they always bring up civility, decorum. That's the issue with Keisha. They don't know how to carry themselves. I'm gonna ask you a question. If someone spit in your face, how would you handle it? Would you be dignified? Would you have decorum? Would you, particularly if they did it more than once? I know some of you said, no, that's not going to be a more than once thing. Okay, I got that. But if they did it more than once, I want to remind you of something, because see, I am in media. I own media properties myself. I own radio stations, and I wrote for years on a national scale and reported for years with the PGA, the golf. I probably saw Tiger Woods play in person about 100 different rounds. I've interviewed him, been a part of the group interviewing him as many times as I saw him play. At least 3 or 4 times every tournament. Walked with his then wife, bodyguard, and his mother as friends. So I know media and how media works. I've been deep involved in it. But the media in Savannah is real strange. It's more like propaganda than media. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. And so, when they first went on council, Keisha, Alicia, Bernetta, and at the time, Stella Shabazz, were aggravated about the fact that Van wasn't playing fair. As soon as he got in, he passed a rule where nothing could go on the agenda unless 5 people approved it going on the agenda, which would have probably been illegal. And then he quickly flipped because Alicia and Dietrich and Linda had made the announcement together in Forsyth Park. John McMasters was there. Julius Hall was there. We championed them. But as soon as they got elected, it was over. They flipped and got with Van and forgot all the promises they made to the community. Concerning John's statement of it's unbelievable no topics on litigation, personnel, or land purchases have occurred, you're right, it's impossible. And Chuck Fagan says, gotta be violating some part of sunshine laws. Actually probably is, but that's not the laws I think he's violating. Then he says the state attorney's general office should be asked to investigate no executive sessions. Oh, we need to write the letter. Chuck Fagan says, to paraphrase James Baldwin, when a white man says, give me liberty or give me death, we praise him. When a black man stands up and says the very same thing, he is ridiculed, called a radical, and etc. But yes, John, what Van has done with the city of Savannah is totally unconstitutional. But here's the deal. 3.5 years ago, in February of, more than 3.5 years ago, in February or early March of 2020, the newly elected council had authorized a search for a permanent city manager. When Eddie DeLoach left, Hernandez had left, and so they had an interim city manager, Patrick Monahan. Patrick Monahan, I've known him since we were young in college and stuff. So Patrick was a good city manager, and he knew the system. He worked at the county, and so they had regular executive sessions. They had regular order, so to speak. Well, the city had designated that they would hire a firm to do a national search and find a permanent city manager. They did. They found some people. They got a group. I think they must have been up to 12 or 20 or something. It was a big group. Then they voted and it got down to 4 people. Down to 4 candidates. They voted again when it got down to 4 candidates. Van's pick was not in, didn't make the cut. Van's pick did not make the cut. And with the city already spending the money for the process, and them already voting to get down to this view, you can go back and read the articles in the paper. He scuttled the whole process because his pick didn't make it. He asked his clique on the council to vote, shut the whole thing down, and they did. That's when Keisha Carter got angry, and rightfully so, and said some things that she probably shouldn't have said, but she didn't do it toward anybody. It was about the situation, the unfairness, the unrighteousness of it. Now, but that's not, and they put her through some changes about it, censored and all kind of things. All that went on 3.5 years ago. I want y'all to hear this. 3.5 years ago. Since that time, Purdy has called her a black ghetto bee, told her on council in a positive meeting, shut up, Keisha. Not one word in the paper. Whenever they talk about him, they never bring up the fact that he used that profanity or caused any failure of decorum. So what's going on here? This is propaganda, people. You are being bamboozled. Keisha Gibson Carter is a 27-year wife of Sam Carter, Coach Sam Carter, who molds and makes it and helps with character and physicality young prospects in the sports arena. Coach Carter is a wonderful man, decent human being. 27 years of marriage to Keisha Carter. They live over in Jackson Park. Beautiful palatial home. I said they're like a little TV couple. They have 3 children. The oldest, a son who's in the armed forces. The second daughter's in college, becoming an engineer. The youngest daughter, my buddy, my hero, I call her. She got spunk. The youngest daughter at high school over in Jenkins High School. This is a good, clean, sound, sober family. She got angry because of injustice. Go back and play the tapes. She realized what took place, and she changed her wall clothes. Now they get mad with her because she makes sense. They get mad with her because she's articulate. They get mad with her because she's educated. They get mad with her because she's professional. They get mad with her because she's dangerous to the establishment, because they can't buy her like they have bought him. That she does have a soul for the people. That she does care about what happens to everybody, including big business. Big business will do great under Keisha Gibson Carter as mayor of Savannah. But the poor, the needy, and the left out will not be left out poor and needy. We will lift them. We will. There's enough for everybody in this situation. More than enough. For 16 years, Van Johnson represented the 1st District. The last 4 years is the first time the 1st District has been on the agenda at all. Van had a lady on TV the other day saying, there was an old lady saying she was fixing her roof. And I understand the lady was grateful that the city came in and fixed the roof with Van standing there taking pictures with her. But that was one roof, and it was just a photo op. Think about it over the last few years. All Keisha Gibson Carter has been is on point, on issue after issue after issue after issue. She has a master's degree in public administration, sat in the same classes at Van at Savannah State University, along with Bryant Lanier. They all have master's degrees in public administration. Alicia Miller Blakely has been around the world 4 times in 25 years in military service. That'll get you ready to do anything in public service. We've got Rashida Edwards, sharp as a tack, smart businesswoman. We've got Robert Bryant for the 5th, super smart, PhD. We've got Todd Rhodes, hard-working, dedicated businessman, a successful young black businessman, to replace Linda. I don't know where I'm going. Right at this point. Lord have mercy. I never thought she'd be this far gone. Blessing the folks out at the little forum, just blessing people out. And the other day, they sitting in the forum and said, "I don't need the people need me." Wow. My gosh, my goodness. Where were you going with this? That's right, Dietrich, Linda, and Curtis are co-conspirators, but let me tell you something. Dietrich and Linda didn't get the money that they should have got. Now they did get some. Linda, they got more than they got 4 years ago, but they didn't get Rosser the money, and they didn't get Carol Bell money. John McMaster says Van and his majority have had 4 years to fully staff the police department, and they still have 150 vacancies. Let me tell you something about that. What most people don't, if you're not keeping up with it, you wouldn't see it. What most people don't realize is actually the city of Savannah had over 100 vacancies when Van took office. Okay? And they went to work and they filled a lot of those vacancies. They got down to where they only had like 60 some vacancies. And then, because his pick, Mr. Minter, had a police department that was completely out of control. When I say completely out of control. So much so that when he was, Van talked him into leaving because Van knew he would be albatross around his neck coming up to this election. So Van talked him into leaving and supposedly had him nominated to become U.S. Marshal. Have you ever heard of somebody being nominated to become a U.S. Marshal and never becoming a U.S. Marshal? I said on this show, when they nominated him to be the U.S. Marshal, I said, that ain't going to happen. Well, Pastor Small, how would you know that ain't going to happen? Because when you're nominated to be a U.S. Marshal, the FBI sends people to your area to vet you. And they ask people who are involved in the area about you. And they look at the news articles, and they look at the reports, and they look at your the number of complaints that you have and as a police officer. And wait a minute. And this police chief had a petition against him for his removal by the officers working for him. You're not going to make that person the U.S. Marshal. That ain't going to happen. And it didn't. Now, they put in the paper that he was going to be the U.S. Marshal, but then they put in the paper that he was being reconsidered. And I'm not against Mr. Minter. I just don't think I think he just didn't know what he was doing. And on his watch, quietly, remember I told you the thing about the newspaper not being fair to Keisha? Wasn't fair to the black community either. Because what most black folk don't know, and most white folk don't even know, is that in a 2.5 year period, there were 6 black people killed at the hands of Savannah Police Department. 6. And not one police officer was ever charged with excessive force, at all. Not one. 6 in 2.5 years. Doesn't happen anywhere. You wouldn't get 6 in Atlanta with 5 times the population. Anyway, Van has failed the community, but he thinks that black folks are stupid, and so he will give us some gestures. Like I was saying, Keisha Gibson Carter is a settled 27-year married to one man with 3 kids, living well off over in Jackson Park right next to Habersham Woods. She doesn't have to be bothered with this. But somehow God has put in her spirit that she can make a real difference. And I'm asking you all to join me in helping her do that. Van is thinking he's smarter than the black community. So what he do is he gets to within about 70 days of being elected and start bringing in black folks that are popular in the community and starts giving them honorary streets. Coach Booker, Flage's daughter, basketball player, give her honorary street. Virginia Edwards, who deserve it. Larry McDuffie. These people deserve these honorary streets. What they don't deserve is to be exploited by Mr. Van Johnson, who even exploited mothers who had children to die from violence when we had all this violence going on, when they had that shooting and stuff over in his village. And he said, I'm bringing Mothers Against Crime together for my task force. And that's the last time you heard of that group. And then when somebody said, well, what about the father? And he brought some black men and had them stand around him for a press conference. Van Johnson's way of dealing with the black community only lasts as long as the next news cycle. Once we stop seeing something in the news, that issue's gone for far as he's concerned for black folk. And I'm gonna ask, I had a black guy call me, why aren't you supporting Van? I think Van did a good job. I said, do you? I said, yeah. I said, okay, tell me one thing that he initiated for the African American community. Now, you can name 6 or 7 things he did for the gay community. You could name 6 or 7 things he did for the white business community, even for the Hispanic community. What about the black community? Several years ago, might have been 25, 30 years ago, Abigail Jordan and myself were among the people featured in a magazine, that's a weekly magazine by the Washington Post, nationally distributed weekly magazine. Washington Post had a weekly magazine. The gentleman came to interview me actually at my house, at the house I'm in right now. And when he came to my house, he sat down at the table and he asked me, why do you think Clarence doesn't feel like he has a need to do anything to help black people who were like him as far as affirmative action after he received affirmative action? I said, one of the grave difficulties is that some of us, having been lifted up from the doldrums of mediocrity and poverty, aspire so much to be white that we become a type of white mind. I said one of the strange things about white people who hate black folk is they just hate them because they're black. They don't hate them because they know them. They don't hate them because they've been around them. They don't hate them because, you know, these hatreds sometimes, these great haters come from states, Missouri, Wisconsin, Kentucky, where a lot of these people lived in counties where there weren't no black people. Hate them anyway. And so Clarence, in his aspiration to become a white fellow, got this disease, this pathology that causes him to hate black folk. He has a pathological hatred for his own race. That quote was put in the paper, in the magazine. Van Johnson has a pathological hatred for his own race. You can tell. Now he wants to use us. He wants to manipulate us. But you can tell how hard he fought to not put Susie King Taylor's name on that square. And how much he wants to be white, by how much he fought to try to keep Calhoun's name on the square. Think about that. Think about what mindset he has to have in order to, even at the end, make statements to the effect that we need to leave something on there to show that it used to be named after the slavery proponent, John C. Calhoun, whose family members said we needed to take his name off because he didn't deserve the honor. In closing, we need to pray that these fights, particularly the one in Israel, between the Palestinians and the Israelis or Jews, we need to pray that this thing comes to a peaceful conclusion. I'm going to do something in this civil discourse that I have called Tell It Like It Is. I'm going to do something that normally I wouldn't do. I try not to mix them up too much. So, but I think I better give you all some insight. In the Bible, we find prophecy. And I'm going to give this to you. Even you all who are not particularly religious might find this interesting. The book is called Amos, A-M-O-S. The book is called Amos. And in the first chapter of the book of Amos, we may have a prophetic statement concerning what's going on now. We may have. In Amos, the first chapter, 6 verses says, Thus saith the Lord, for three transgressions of Gaza, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole captivity, to deliver them up to Edom. I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof. I will cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the scepter from Ashkelon. I will turn mine hand against Ekron, and the remnant of the Philistines, which are the Palestinians, shall perish, saith the Lord God. That's Amos, the fifth. Amos, that's Amos, first chapter, 6 through 8. There's more there, but I just thought that you'd know. And if you say, well, that's the Bible, that ain't got to be so, I want you to remember now, in the book of Jeremiah, written hundreds of years before Jesus, more like 2,600-700 years before now, that in the Bible it says, behold, I will make you a nation in a day, talking about Israel, talking about the Jews, talking about Hebrews. I will make you a nation in a day, and in a day, May 12th, 1948, Israel became a nation again on that day. There are a few nations you can point out to that very day, but on that day, and within a few hours, America recognized them as a nation. I just want you to know, the difficulty is, if this thing grows to the conflagration that I think it might, our sons and daughters and our treasure, blood, sweat, and tears, may very well be a part of the balance. I'm Reverend Dr. Leonard Small, pastor of the Litway Missionary Baptist Church. We'll be back on this platform in the morning with our Sunday school lesson at 10 and our regular morning worship service around 11:15, 11:30. God bless you. God keep you. Is our prayer. We invite you to come to our services at 2335 Shell Road. Oh, one other thing. Concerning the homeless in the actions of the police in the city of Brunswick, I am taking them to court. Surprise, surprise. Y'all be blessed. Bye-bye.